Hello and welcome to our webinar, The Benefits of Cogmed and Its Use in Private Practice. Our presenters today are Katarina, Rannaleet from Cogmed, and Kyra, Minichan, our Pearson Healthcare Assessment Consultant. We also have Alila Warren and Scott Pawson from Pearson with us today, and they will monitor the chat or the Q&A during the presentation. This webinar is presented in broadcast audio. Please turn up your computer speakers as there are no dial-in options. We are also presenting with closed caption. To initiate closed caption on your computer screen, please click on the box with the C on it, click on live transcript and select show subtitle. The webinar handout will be placed into the chat box. Please click on the link and download the document during the presentation. Please type your questions, concerns, and comments into the Zoom Q&A. We'll answer your questions live, time permitting. If your question is not answered during the live presentation, please fill out the follow-up form in the link that will pop up after the webinar. Webinar certificates of attendance will automatically be emailed to you within 3 weeks if you participate for the full hour. Please do not close your browser at the conclusion of the webinar. If you have any questions that were not answered or you wish to speak to a representative, there's a form you can fill out and we will follow up with you. With that being said, I will turn it over to Katarina.
All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Katarina. I am the marketing director of Cogmed. And together with my colleague Kyra today, we're going to go through the basics of Cogmed and how to put it to use in private practice. I'm going to start us off by zooming out a little bit to just situate ourselves with where we are and why all of this matters, really. We now live in an attention economy. So the biggest companies of today have monetized our focus. Their business models are based on their ability to capture, hold, and direct our collective attention. And they use really any means necessary to accomplish this. This is a big change to our environment, one that has happened very quickly. Over the past 200 years, we have moved from industrialization and the rise of specified manual skills-based work into the information age and knowledge or degree-based work to now the attention economy and its demands for predominantly high-tech skills or soft skills, skills that aren't necessarily taught in traditional degree programs. This shift in our environment I heard something. All good. Sorry. This shift in our environment leads to new demands on people. We've moved from a school where students spent their days seated in neat rows of desks, quietly listening to a teacher lecturing on a subject, into self-directed, often project-based learning environment focused on independence and agency, screen heavy with remote and distance learning thrown into the mix. This carries on into the working environment of today, the working environment that children will eventually enter into. A post-pandemic increase in remote work where you take video meetings in the same room as your partner, or while the laundry is running in the background, sometimes you're even caring for a sick kid at home at the same time. Or in your hybrid role in an open office landscape, listening to coworkers' calls and conversations with constant notification streams from your email or your Slack or Teams. A recent study found that the average office worker is interrupted 56 times per day. That's one interruption every 8.5 minutes. Studies also show that once interrupted, it can take up to 23 minutes to get back on track with what you were doing. Another study found that people interact with their smartphones, a new fun change to our environment, something like 150 times per day. Adolescents spend upwards of 7 hours per day on screens that are designed to steal your focus and keep you engaged as long as possible. At the same time, the prevalence of ADHD is increasing. over the 2 decades from 1997 to 2016, US national population surveys estimate an increase in the prevalence of ADHD diagnoses among children from 6% to 10%. That is a 66% increase in 20 years. Up to 90% of children with ADHD continue to experience symptoms into adulthood. There are, of course, many possible explanations for this increase, such as increased availability of testing, an increased understanding of how symptoms manifest and how they differ across ages and genders, decrease in stigma. But whatever the reason, the fact remains that potentially 1 in 10 people have issues with attention and focus in a world where these skills are more vital than ever before. We see that a child's attention is correlated with academic success and success in professional life. Your ability to pay attention matters for your future outcomes. We also know that attention is a limited resource. Every single action we take, calling our grandparents, cleaning up the kitchen, scrolling through our phones, answering an email, is a transaction. We are taking what little attention we have and diverting it towards something else. And if you have very little capacity for sustained attention to begin with, you run the risk of flitting between 1,000 different things without being able to deeply focus on getting any one thing done. A lot of the things that steal our attention are environmental. So open office spaces, notifications, screens. But other than going off the grid and moving into a yurt somewhere out in the Arctic Circle, we can't disconnect from this. For the majority of people, these things aren't going away. The attention economy is our environment, and there's very little we can do to change that. But we can impact ourselves. What we have is a zero-sum game. When you pay attention to one thing, you ignore something else. This makes attention our most valuable asset. And being able to sustain and focus your attention is a core and necessary skill in today's world. This is where Cogmed comes in. So Cogmed is the most proven digital tool to increase attention. The first study of Cogmed was published in 2002. And as far as I'm aware, that was the first ever study to find that a cognitive training program could improve attention. In the 2 decades since, over 120 articles have been published in journals such as Science and Nature, confirming and building upon these original findings. The breadth and volume of this research makes Cogmed the most well-researched and proven digital tool for improved attention. The studies find benefits more or less across the board. We on the Cogmed team like to say that the target group for Cogmed is anyone with a brain, but clinically we can narrow it into usage groups such as ADHD, stroke and traumatic brain injury, and cancer treatment recovery. So patient groups with attention deficit as a core component. Today, Cogmed is used by healthcare and school professionals across the globe to tackle just this attention deficit. You can find a more in-depth look at the research in our research summary on the Cogmed website, but in short, Cogmed's primary effects are in the areas of working memory capacity and attentional capacity. Those 2 cognitive abilities are deeply intertwined. An anecdote is that the scientists who originally coined the term working memory have since stated that they wished they labeled this cognitive function working attention rather than working memory, as this is a much more apt description for what it enables you to do. Meta-analyses of Cogmed research shows effects on working memory or working attention equivalent to 2 years of typical childhood development. We see a 25% average improvement in attentional capacity, and most importantly, we see no negative side effects. Large-scale clinical trials show that the effects of Cogmed can be sustained over time. The effects can even continue to improve on their own beyond the completion date of the program. Studies also show that the effects on attention transfer to other areas. For children, chief among these areas is learning. One study, for example, found a 50% average reduction in learning impairment among children and adolescents with ADHD. So now for the tool itself. Sorry, I'm organizing my notes here. Cogmed, the tool, consists of a set of adaptive exercises which target the cognitive processes responsible for working memory and attention. The tool is completely web-based, so it can be used in a variety of settings on a variety of devices, remotely or in person. The Cogmed training protocols are adjustable, so you can tailor it to suit individual needs. Cogmed also has built-in professional training covering the tool itself, as well as our suggested implementation model, so you know exactly how to successfully use this in practice with your clients. I believe we're emailing all of you or in that link with the packet. There are video demos of the product itself, the coaching materials, everything that is available to licensed Cogmed providers so that you can explore the details in your own time. But I'm going to, of course, give you a short overview now as well. So each time your clients log in to do Cogmed, they'll see the exercises they need to complete during that daily block of training. The exercises themselves are simple and straightforward in their design, plug and play. Before they begin the first time, there's a mandatory visual instruction that's always available again in case they need a reminder. So the exercises, the users, they get a prompt and then they respond like you see in this GIF. The level of difficulty will automatically adapt to performance. So the more you improve, the harder it gets. Some exercises are more visual, some are more verbal or numerical. They all include audio cues for an auditory component. Your clients will train with Cogmed between 25 and 50 minutes each training block, between 3 and 5 days each week, for a total of 5 to 13 weeks to complete the program in full. There is also an optional gamification where the user will collect gold and gems during their training, and at the end of each block, use these to build their Cogmed Island cityscape, which is what you're seeing in these colorful images. This functions as an immediate reward to make training fun and support motivation. You, as the provider, follow their progress from our provider interface, the coaching center. You will be able to see when your clients trained, how hard they work, and how they are progressing. This means your clients can work on Cogmed in their own time, and you can still keep track of how they're doing without needing to be with them while they train. This also means Cogmed lends itself well to be used in a telehealth practice. And in fact, most of our licensed providers use Cogmed on a completely remote basis with their clients. Details about what these different graphs and the data means, how you can interpret it, how you use it, is located in the Learning Center, which is that built-in professional development I was talking about earlier. So you have everything you need right at your fingertips when you need it. Now, in the 20 years that Cogmed has been available, it's being used by over 200,000 people. I can point to research studies, product features, all of it, all day, but this is what really matters. Cogmed has made a real difference in real people's lives. And someone who knows just how useful Cogmed can be is my co-host, Kyra Minichan, who was one of our earliest adopters. The story you see here from Callie H. She worked with Kyra to do Cogmed. And I'm sure Kyra will tell you a little bit more about her experience with clients. So I'm going to hand it over to Kyra now for part 2. And I'll see you in the question box for those of you who have questions. Don't forget to input them so that we can get to them as well.
Thank you, Katarina. I appreciate it. And you did a great job explaining the why people need to use Cogmed. And now I'm going to try to tell you how to use it. probably the number one question that I get asked as the Pearson representative for Cogmed is, how do I implement Cogmed into my practice? That's a little bit of a loaded question because everybody's practice is unique to them. I mean, some, like Katarina said, some people use it completely remote. Some people use it in person. And age range matters too. I know for me, I used Cogmed for the past 10 years. I can stand by it 100%. It changed the face of my private practice. It changed the lives of everybody that I used Cogmed with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But I know that as far as keeping it simple, I try to narrow it down to 3 easy steps, no matter what your practice is. So basically, if you want to be successful with Cogmed, you have to implement these 3 steps: educate, equip, empower. And they actually ended up being, from day one of my private practice, this was in my mission statement. And it's kind of funny now when I looked back, it just kind of flew out of my mouth when I was putting this presentation together, because it is so valuable. This is where you really impact the people that you work with. So as it relates to Cogmed, the education part is you have to really get, you want a commitment from your client. And the only way that they can understand why they're going to do something is to educate them on the importance of it. So you have to know, number one, what it is that you're going for, and let them see that Cogmed can get them there. So as far as I always started with a startup session. That is one that comes before you even do day one of Cogmed. So my education came in on the front end. This is just, I'm giving you an example of my situation. Doesn't mean you have to, but I will tell you that it's, if you don't do this part of it, it will be harder to keep them engaged when in the middle of Cogmed, when it gets hard, when it gets monotonous. So when you really help your client understand why it's important to go through Cogmed on the front end, you'll have less on the back end. So you want to educate them on working memory. I mean, most people don't know what working memory does. I know that I even speak to other therapists like myself. I'm a speech language pathologist, have been one for 30 years. I speak to other speech therapists, and oftentimes they don't know what working memory is, because we just can't assume that. You don't want to assume that people know what working memory is, what attention is. I would have clients and parents come to me, bring their psychological education evaluations, look at it and see that there's a low working memory and say, well, what does that mean? This is where you spend that time educating them. And then as far as equipping, that next step, you want to make sure that you set up your boundaries, your expectations, your what are they going to do with Cogmed? So as far as equipping them to be successful, nobody wants to fail. And your job as the Cogmed coach is to make sure that they don't fail. Failure is not an option. And when I say fail, I don't mean fail like, oh, they didn't do a good job. I mean, actually, they don't finish, because you want to set them up with the success in however their life looks. So for example, if you're a coach and you know that you can only coach them 1 day a week in person, and they're going to be, they're going to do it on their own the other 3 days, then equip them with that, give them that knowledge. You may be a coach that you are there every day and you want to set that up. So you want to equip them with all the skills that they need. I always told them to, in my questionnaire was just like, what's something that you haven't allowed yourself to, just kind of a luxury that you haven't allowed yourself to get, that kind of a reward. And whatever they spoke, I said, okay, so let's set that as your reward at the end. When you're finished with Cogmed, that luxury you're going to do for yourself, you're going to buy for yourself, or you're going to get for yourself. If it's a young person, I would speak to the family and say, is there something that your child is saying that they want? You kind of know that you're going to buy it eventually, but they don't know that. Use that as the carrot. That's the reward that they're going to get. So you set all this stuff in place and equipping them for success. And then the last piece of the empowerment is You're their hype squad. You're the one that is going to, you're their guide. That's the best vision I gave. So I just took on the role as, we're going up a mountain and I'm going to guide them through this, and I'm not going to leave them. I'm always going to be with them. So I would just always say, you know, whatever it takes to get them up the mountain and through the program is what I was going to do, what I'm going to do. Some people need more encouragement than others. Some people don't. But knowing that someone's going to be with you throughout and letting them know that builds that trust and allows them to grab hold of the program itself. It also gives, what I love is the humanization of Cogmed. Cogmed is a tool. It is not a human. And we as human beings need connection. We need to know that someone believes in us. We need to know that someone is going to be there for us. Whether we like to think of it or not, whether we express it or not, that's just human nature. It's always been, it always will be. And you have the power to do that. And that's how you empower others. That's probably the biggest piece to this, is getting them through and empowering them to just not quit. Because quitting is not an option. And if I can say one thing about, you know, as a Cogmed coach, this was my number one rule. Quitting was not an option. It didn't matter if they didn't perform at the level that I thought they could, because I knew without a shadow of doubt, and this is something that I've seen over the course of 10 years with Cogmed, if you don't quit and if you do the program, if they do the program, they will see a benefit. In the 10 years that I ran it, I did not have one person tell me that it didn't benefit them. I didn't have one person ask for a refund. I didn't have one person, and when I say person, oftentimes it was a parent or it was somebody else that was paying for it. And the reason I know that that didn't happen is because they did not quit. There were 2 exceptions to that rule when I pulled the plug, meaning I misread a situation that probably they just weren't the right fit. And that's okay too. I'm just putting that out there. But as far as in that 10 years, everybody else finished, and they finished because I kept this as a mantra. And I think that's something that you need to keep too, is quitting is not an option. You have to think of your client. Oftentimes, if you have decreased attention, if you have decreased working memory, then when your brain feels that tug, when it feels that piece of, oh, this is hard, it signals the amygdala to say fight, flight, or freeze, and they opt out. And they typically are the person who underperforms because they quit when things get hard. And one of the things that probably the number one response that I got after seeing clients for and seeing them through Cogmed, what they would say to me is either if it was a parent, my child has confidence, or it was oftentimes the kids saying, I feel good now, I can do this. And it's because they finished something probably for the first time in their life. I had so many people come and tell me, you know, my child's never finished a book. Now they're finishing a book. My child has never, you know, finished a project on their own. They never independently started their homework without me. They needed this, they needed that. Confidence, we underestimate what confidence does in kids, especially in smart kids. And when we're talking about ADHD specifically, you're talking about average to above average IQ. I worked with many gifted kids whose IQ were off the charts, but they weren't finishing things. They were totally underperforming. And that was because of that working memory executive function, and they would just quit. So this piece, while it seems simple, is not simple, because, you know, grumbling starts to happen when things get hard. And as a coach or as a person who is, you know, their guide, that's not always fun. You don't always want to hear someone complain there. And oftentimes, especially the ones, there weren't as many that I actually expected it to be worse, but they often will tell the parent or the loved one that it's hard and complain to them. So while you don't hear it from the patient per se, you may hear it from the person who is not the patient, which I feel is a little bit harder because they're just getting the grumbles. You have to offset that by saying, that's okay, you got to ignore it, we're going to finish. So that's one of the best advice I can tell you. If you have Cogmed and you are a Cogmed coach, make this your number one priority. Quitting is not an option. Okay, so next, the other next important piece is getting good at connecting the dots. And I love this visual because while you can see that it's a man, there are things that are missing. And how are you going to make this connect? How are you going to get this whole person to see what's going on? You have to understand as the coach, and this will come, number one, through experience. The longer you take people, the more people you take through Cogmed. But really, you need to do some research yourself and understand, what will I see when I increase someone's attention and working memory? And that's going to depend on the client. So in the case of children, if it's academics, you're going to see, let's say, working memory. You're going to see an increase in reading comprehension. You're going to see an increase in math, especially mental math. You need to be able to cast that vision and let those people know this is what lies ahead. Or you also need to know when someone comes to you and says, hey, do you think this has to, I walked by their room, I walked by my child's room the other night and they were actually reading a book. And when I asked them, I was like, that they can't be. Maybe they're just doing that for me. And I actually asked them questions and they knew what they were reading. Do you think that has anything to do with what we're doing here? Yes. The answer is yes. And that's one thing that I do want to speak a little bit towards, because when we're talking about the brain, you can't see it. And we often, as human beings, want to just doubt. We want to say, oh, it's not because of what we did that made a difference. It was because of, it just would have happened anyway. I got real used to hearing this because I'm a speech language pathologist. So in the field of rehab, when I worked with the rehab team of occupational therapists and physical therapists and myself, what can you see? You can see a leg that is disabled and all of a sudden gets better and they're using their leg. With occupational therapy, you can see activities of daily living coming out and see it play, and you know that they've worked with their hands, you know that they've worked with their arm, you know that they've worked with fine motor skills. But when it comes to speech language pathology, we worked with the brain. You don't see it. So we got second guessed all the time. I think, as far as being a therapist, I got real good at being able to defend what I was doing, mainly because I had to. But it became now not a defense. It was basically offense, because I can talk about it very, very confidently. I know when I've taken someone from a coma-based state and taken them all the way through the levels of trauma, levels of cognitive awareness, and also then gotten them to the other side to where they can be a functional human being out in the world. I know the power of neuroscience. I've seen that, but not everybody has. So what I had to do when I was working with Cogmed is rely back to my humble beginnings and say, wait a minute, this is cognitive intervention. The fact that I'm not having to do exercises one-on-one with a client, that's the beauty of Cogmed. You're actually able to, they've done it for you, which is great. I would have loved to have had that 30 years ago. But what happens with that, when you do it with intensity, duration, and frequency, it follows the neuroscience research that says it changes the brain. And when you see the things on the outside that they could not do prior to starting this, then what is there to argue about? And just give yourself, say, yeah, absolutely. This is why it did it. They didn't, if they were going to change, they would have already changed. That's what I always tell the parents. I'm like, look, I can look back at their psychological education evaluation. This working memory was low in first grade when they were tested, in fourth grade when they were tested, and now when they're in middle school, it was still tested and it was still low. Okay, we took them through Cogmed, and guess what? The next testing showed working memory improvement. What changed? Cogmed changed. They went through that. So how do you argue with that? So you can get good at connecting those dots and knowing and understanding the power of attention, the power of working memory. The other piece to this that I was a little bit late to the game in connecting, just because it took me a minute to be like, oh my gosh, this is actually research-based and it's happening. Metacognitive skills, when you raise the working memory and executive function, you raise metacognitive skills. So these kids who can't really hold on and self-reflect and self-monitor, that's because it's kind of like the tandem bicycle goes together. So once you raise working memory, once you raise those skills, those cognitive skills, guess what? Another cognitive skill is raised too. And that's that metacognitive skill. And you'd be surprised what that does. Just the level of awareness of being able to self-reflect, self-monitor, it's awareness to where you can catch yourself doing things and say, oh, wait a minute, I don't need to do that. I can do it another way. And there's power in that. So the metacognitive skill improvement that I saw with Cogmed, while it's not documented in research for Cogmed, because metacognitive skills are hard to document, I can tell you 100% without any doubt that I saw it time and time again. So the power of connecting those dots for the client, for the parent, for the patient, it makes a difference. So you can get good at that. Make sure that when, I have so many notes of just what I saw, what happened after, before and after. Number one, you're going to want to keep those notes, because on the days of doubt, you can go back and reflect and say, oh, that's right, so-and-so did this, followed the same pattern. And, right before I saw a change, he maybe dropped down a little bit, but then he absolutely went gangbusters after that. So I would say take good notes, the before and after, and just keep it in a way that you can reflect, and you can also share with whenever you have another person that's similar. Okay, so the other piece that I get asked a lot was, does the training last? Do the skills transfer? There is a pediatrician named Dr. Arthur Lavin, I think is how you pronounce his name. I might not have said that right. He was a longtime user of Cogmed as well. There's a really good blog post that he wrote. It's crazy that when I was reading the blog post and reading what he said, that I was just finding myself going, yes, 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 because we saw the same things. And I don't know that I've never met this man, but he used Cogmed the same way I used Cogmed, and we saw the same results. And he said 10 to 15 years later, I've spoken with these individuals, now adults, and learned that the impact of Cogmed has endured without further training. Same with me. I didn't have to take my people through it again. The only time that I would ever repeat Cogmed was if they had had a concussion, which I worked with a lot of athletes, so sometimes that would happen, but not very often, because it lasts. I read somewhere, and I'm not for sure where that research is, but your working memory will start to decline on average at the age of 35. But until then, it's just the same. That's why when you see a test, when you see psychological testing done at first grade and there's no intervention, nothing's changed, then when they repeat it, the same thing's going to be there, a reduced working memory. It's not until you actually go in and do something different and actually change the brain, will the brain change. But once it changes, it absolutely stays there until something happens, if there's an injury, if there's a concussion, or if it's just age. But even age now, we're seeing a huge boost in the working memory. You can do it later in life. You can absolutely change it. I know with myself, with my husband, with my friends, we're all on that brain training change because we want to stay at our optimal brain health. It's just good science. But as far as making it last for your customers, because parents will say, well, I didn't see any transfer, I didn't see anything, then they don't know what they're looking for. If they went through Cogmed, you will see it last. It will not decline. If they went through the program and they did the program as it was designed to do, then you will see lasting results. And as a matter of fact, what also Cogmed, the research, and I really didn't think too much about this, but in the research, it would say your brain will continue to get stronger, the working memory, for 2 months. And I thought, okay, 2 months. But actually what happened was I would start getting emails, or I would have someone stop by the office and they would say, you're not going to believe what so-and-so did. The emails were easy to track. And at one point, I don't know, I'm just a curious person, so I'm always collecting my own little data in my head. And I was like, I saw a pattern happening. And the pattern was the fact that at that 2-month mark, the person who had gone through Cogmed and finished had done something out of the ordinary, had done something that they hadn't done before. And I tracked it, and it was 2 months. So what does that say? Going back to that, connecting the dots. Okay, I can sit here and say, you know what? While I'm not on the research end of it, when my clinical observations align with the research that Cogmed is putting out, I know I have a good product. I know I can stand behind that product. And that's what I kept seeing time and time again. For the past 10 years, I didn't know anybody at Cogmed. I wasn't loyal to them because, oh, I'm their friend or they're giving me something. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. I knew the product. I knew it aligned with the research, and I knew it transformed the lives that I was working with. And so that's why I kept using it. Which leads me to the next slide. If you knew that you had knowledge of something that would significantly help someone, would you tell them about it? It's honestly why I'm here today, because I believe in this product so much that I want more people to use it. Not because I want to sell Cogmed, because I want to transform lives. That's what I went in to do. That's why I became a speech language pathologist. It was to help and serve others. That's still my mission in life. I know this product can do it. And I also know that I've used so many other different products that did not stand the test of time, that why wouldn't I go back to the one that did? And also I have this innate personality thing that says, you know what? When I care, I share. And that's honestly what I'm doing with you today, is I'm sharing with you something that I know without a shadow of a doubt. I don't have any doubts because I've used it and I've stuck with it for the past 10 years. And I'm telling you that if you want something that will change the course of what we need today in society, which Katarina did a beautiful job explaining, why is there such a demand for attention? What else is out there? What are you going to do? Because are we just going to walk around and let everybody just have poor attention and not pay attention? Are we going to just have these students who are continuing to struggle in school but are smart, they're underperforming? What are we going to do for those kids? What are we going to do for the adults who have a TBI, they get discharged out of rehab due to their insurance not wanting to pay or whatever, for all kinds of different circumstances, but they still need a product that will take them to the next level. What are we going to give them? What are we going to give to the person who has absolutely beat cancer, but wants to get back to their optimal brain performance prior to that? What are you going to offer them? this is something that you can offer them. And this is something that I can tell you will work and will make a difference in their life. So why wouldn't you tell them? Why wouldn't you be curious about it? That's just my question. And again, I feel like sometimes I'm kind of the person who, when I know something, I can't not know it. So be forewarned, now you know it. All right. And the last part of this is if you're ready to get started. We here at Pearson have a way of, you can submit your order form. We have a team ready and waiting for you to call or connect with any of us, and we can get you started and signed up for to become a coach and actually start transforming lives one Cogmed person at a time. All right, so now we get to the good part, which are questions. And
Yeah.
I love random questions, so hit me with them.
I wanted to actually highlight one of the questions that came in, which is so far the only one. So get in there, write us your questions so that we can answer them for you. Our goal was to leave a lot of time for questions, which I feel like we've managed to do. So please submit any and all queries into that question box. There's a question that says, have there been any studies on the changes in EEG activity using Cogmed? Decrease in slow wave activity, increases in HEG hemodynamic outcomes in the prefrontal cortex. And I will answer this question, Kyra, don't worry.
I was like,
and the answer to your question is yes, there have been studies that see increased activity in the brain from Cogmed, primarily activity in the parietal and prefrontal cortices. There is also studies showing increased activity in dopamine receptors. So there's a couple that have been done over time. The reason why I also wanted to answer this one live instead of typing it out for you in the box was that we had a team session earlier today going over with our founder, Professor Thorkell Klingberg, who did the seminal study of Cogmed. He was going through what they're currently working on in their lab, and this is one of their high interests. So they're currently conducting studies where people are doing Cogmed training while being monitored by brain imaging equipment to try to determine which areas of the brain are being utilized in between the inputs so in between each of the trial inputs to see where this activity is happening, how it can be improved. That study isn't finalized yet. It will be soon. We see increased activity is the takeaway from that, which is, it's really very cool to just see how the brain works while you're doing Cogmed. There was another question. Are there studies with diverse populations like Latinx or African Americans and effectiveness and validation of Cogmed? There are over 120 studies with various population groups and demographics, a lot of them controlled for different socioeconomic factors. Yes, Cogmed works essentially across the board, is effective and with validation. What are the effect sizes that are found at average of studies completed thus far in terms of improvement of ADHD symptoms? So that number I mentioned, 25% increase in attentional capacity, is based on the Connors Writing Scale T-score, so yes, those are average effect sizes. Attention, on average, working memory, we talk about it is in standard deviation, so 0.7 standard deviation increase in working memory capacity, which is that number that correlates to 2 years of typical childhood development. These types of effect sizes are very large in terms of cognitive interventions. It is rare to see effect sizes of these magnitudes with these types of interventions. I'm saying that both because I work for Cogmed and because it is true.
And that 2-year number is interesting because oftentimes the population of ADHD will say that it's 2 years delayed in that executive function skill piece. So if you think of the time that you can provide Cogmed, in that 5 to 13 weeks, you can gain 2 years. I mean, say that out loud. There's just not a lot of other products that will do that for you. And I saw it. I mean, I witnessed it in real time. And that's the thing that blew me away, because when I was talking, when I was trying to explain to patients or parents or teachers, where else can you find something that will make this big of an impact in this short period of time? Oftentimes these, kids that are struggling in school, they'll be tutored for the lifespan of school. This cuts down on that significantly.
Yep. Thanks, Kyra. We have 2 questions about billing and insurance that I'm going to answer as one. Insurance codes, insurance companies, it all differs a lot across the United States and between state and state. And Cogmed, we're in Sweden, we're a Swedish company, so we have a very poor mapping of how these different things come together. What I can say is that there is no general claim code for Cogmed itself for insurance. A lot of our providers are able to get insurance reimbursement by incorporating Cogmed into existing treatment plans, either for traumatic brain injury or in terms of, so a lot of your Cogmed practice will be your weekly check-ins with your clients, our sort of coach sessions. And so a lot of our providers will bill these such as you would any regular therapeutic time, and thus get insurance reimbursement that way. A lot of people also just charge out of pocket for Cogmed. Any other questions? Keep them coming. We have 13 more minutes. What is the age that you would start kids with this product? Would you want to talk to, I can talk to where you can start kids with this product. You can start with children as young as 4, really, with Cogmed. There are 2 main program versions. We have Cogmed Standard, which is the standard version most used. It requires that the user is comfortable with numbers and letters in these types of exercises, and that they can sustain engagement with this for about 25 minutes when they do it. We say that for standard, about 7 and up. There's also a version of Cogmed called Light, which excludes exercises with numbers and letters and more advanced sequencing. It's also slightly smaller in volume, so shorter daily sessions. This can be used with kids as young as 4. There are 4-year-olds you can use standard with. There are 15-year-olds who would benefit from Light. So it really depends on the child that you are working with. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, and I actually I've used Cogmed as young as 4, and then all the way through adulthood. The 4-year-olds will need more of a one-on-one to use that, but it is powerful. I'll give you an example as far as, like, I don't know if there are any speech pathologists on here, but as I had a 4-year-old who just did not have the language skills. She could not organize or her language into speech. And so oftentimes she would just get stuck saying, what your name? That's kind of what she would do. And I remember, even that affected everything socially. She would come in the office, and I just remember one of the children that were there, she would say, what your name? She said, you just said that to me, but she could not formulate a lot of other sentences. And so that was just kind of her go-to when she didn't know what else to say. It just kind of came out. We took her through Cogmed, and at the end of Cogmed, we were doing activities, and she went from what your name to, oh, look, that's a hexagon. And so it expanded her speech, it expanded her language, because all of a sudden her executive function skills could organize all the language within. Now, I worked one-on-one with her and took her. She could not have done Cogmed just for me to say, okay, I'm going to do, you know, I'll meet with you one time a week, and then your mom's going to do it 3 other times. That's just that particular child. But 4-year-olds need a lot more of your time with them. So you would use it more as a tool, like, and kind of going back to that whole insurance example, you're providing a therapy. So in my case, it was a speech language therapy, and Cogmed was the tool that I was using in that therapy. So that's one example. But yes, the younger they are, you just have to do, you have to really look at where they are as far as what they can handle, and how independent they can be.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyra. We have 2 questions about both assessing clients as not a good fit for Cogmed and assessing clients as a good fit for Cogmed. And I can speak to the first one there. Just clinically, we would, if you're working with people with photosensitive epilepsy, I would exercise caution in terms if they have ever been triggered by flashing lights on a screen. So that is one to keep in mind. We also see that for people who suffer from severe depression or severe anxiety, this can make it difficult to complete the program. And so I would wait to start Cogmed until you have interventions in place to handle the anxiety and the depression. Other than that, nothing that I can think of, unless Kyra wants to add to that in a second. And then the second bit is what cases or specific criteria to identify good fit and benefit from Cogmed, which I think Kyra is the best equipped person to speak to here.
I'll start with on the back, as far as like who's not. Mental illness is definitely something that you have to kind of, you know, make sure that they're ready. But you can pretty much figure that out if you do what I was saying on the front end about educating. I always made sure that they were committed. Did they have the time? Because, you know, if they didn't have the time, they weren't committed, they weren't bought in, then it was going to be harder to get them to finish. So it was more about the buy-in than it was about, are they a perfect fit? But there were times when I would just say, another thing I would say too is, if I saw a client that I knew that they did not have a skill that was required for Cogmed, I would tell them not yet, and I would refer them out to get that skill worked with or worked on prior to then coming back. But I definitely casted the vision and said, you definitely are going to need this. You just have to go to A before we can go to B. As far as the ideal client, ideally, you want the person who is weak in attention and working memory. I mean, if you've got a person who's weak in attention and memory, they fall within the age range. You have the commitment, you have the they need it, then they're the ideal client. And that I will say too, because we're working with attention, oftentimes people say, well, they can't sit still, they can't do this. Cogmed can condition attention, and they can sit still. Again, that's where you come in as the coach, and you can use this as really a conditioning tool to train that attention. I saw that all the time. Definitely with, I've worked with oppositional defiant ADHD, I've worked with hyperactive ADHD, I've worked with slow processing, the inattentive ADHD. All of the attention changed, and it was due to that conditioning through going through the Cogmed program.
We had a question about licensing requirements for becoming a Cogmed coach. So can, for example, a psychometrist perform Cogmed coaching for clients? Cogmed is accessible as a level B intervention according to the Pearson qualification standards. I do not have these memorized, but they are on the website, level B qualification. So all of that detail will be there. If somebody from Pearson wants to type out an answer specifically to whether psychometrists fulfill those requirements, I would really much appreciate it. And then there's a question of what specific skills are needed. And I wonder if you could provide a little bit more detail about what it is you are actually wanting to know. Do you mean skills for the person completing Cogmed or for the coach to coach Cogmed? So I'll give you a second to input that as well. So I see just Alila posted the qualification. Oh, we need those out to everyone. They just went to host, so somebody could send the qualification requirements out to everyone in the chat. That would be great. Other than that, we have 5 more minutes, so keep your skills based on when clients are a good fit or appropriate based on what was mentioned. So skills for clients.
Okay, so Katarina touched on a little bit, you know, if they're too young and they don't know their numbers, or they don't know the ABCs, or they can't follow directions, you know, verbal directions, that would be an issue. That's a skill that they would need to access. I would say also visual. If they have any type of visual issues, sometimes that just means like visual alignment, or they have difficulty. It's really visual processing, visual alignment. So sometimes I would refer out to for a visual processing assessment, just to make sure that they could actually do this without or they were ready to do it and they would get maximum benefit from it. Another skill I would say, trying to think as far as like ideal. Most of the time, if you're going to attract the person who's looking for improvement in working memory, executive function skills, and attention. And those people typically would be a viable client. I would say that. I'm not sure that that's the greatest answer, but it's almost like it was rare that I did not see someone that wasn't ready. More than anything, I would say it would be due to time commitment. They just couldn't commit to finishing the program at that specific time. And if that was the case, then they just needed to wait.
Yeah. There are also just, in terms of physical skills, Kyra talked a little bit about visual. You need to be able to
physical.
You also need to be able to navigate a computer or a handheld mouse or a trackpad or an iPad. So if that's something that is difficult for a client, then Cogmed would not be a good fit for them.
Yeah, good point.
We have a question about a free trial period available to see how this product works before buying. The answer is no. And the reason is, in order to be able to actually see the benefits of Cogmed, you need to complete a full Cogmed intervention. And that's not something that we can give away in a trial. We have ample videos showing you exactly how the program looks, how it works. There is a demo that you can go and take a look at to try the different exercises. There's a demo of the coaching center where you can take a look at what that looks like. But if you want to do Cogmed, you need to buy Cogmed. So that is an answer to that question. I think where are all of those demos? Excellent question. There are linked on the Pearson Cogmed product page, both the video demos. There's a link into our media library, which contains all of these demo videos. On the Pearson product page, I believe, is also a link to the demo itself. If not, we will make sure to include that right after this so that you can see all of those. And I think with that, we are about out of time. All right. Thank you all so much for your questions and for your time.
Yes, and thank you all for showing up. If you all have any questions, you can contact me. And Alila, if you can put maybe my booking meeting in the chat for them, you can reach me at my email, or you can book a one-on-one with me to answer questions that maybe you didn't get asked today, as well. But I appreciate everybody showing up.